So Rebecca, maybe we should go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Wallace, and I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Student Experience at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Go Blazers.
And my name is Rebecca Kennedy, and I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Student Health and Wellbeing at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Mary, should we give just a little bit of our background as well?
Yeah, sure. So in my role as the Assistant Vice President for Student Experience, I have a portfolio that includes student involvement and leadership development, career center, student multicultural and diversity programs, off-campus student services and family programs, as well as USGA and student conduct and outreach. And my background really comes in through that Dean of Students sort of area. I was at LSU prior to coming to UAB. But before that, I was also spent 14 years in a career in housing through various different universities in the Southeast, Southwest.
And I came up a little bit differently through the ranks in terms of role. Actually initially was as a staff psychologist. So I'm a licensed psychologist, got licensed in 2000, which I know some of you were probably quite young at that time, but that's when I first got licensed. And ignore my printer, I'm sorry, it's printing and I haven't been able to figure out hop in and how to do that at the same time. But this is my second time as an assistant vice president at the University of West Florida. I was an assistant vice president for about 4.5 years before coming up here about 1.5 years ago to University of Alabama at Birmingham.
So most of Rebecca's time has been spent in COVID at UAB. So welcome to our session. We really want to talk to you today about how we utilize actually COVID and the ways in which we had to return safely to campus to develop a health promotion campaign for our students. And so we're going to talk about how we used community values and developed our health promoting campaign.
Yeah. All right. So this is actually the campaign. This is one of the screenshots of kind of what that looks like. And just to kind of get us started, Mary is exactly right. What happened was basically our vice president, Dr. John Jones, he turned to me in a cabinet meeting and said, Rebecca, I need you to develop a health promotion campaign. And as I started to kind of think about, okay, how are we going to do that here at UAB and how are we going to get student input? And I went right back to him and I said, I got to include Mary in this because she's over all of those things that sort of connect us to students. And we really need to kind of tag team on this. And I think this is a new approach and something that will be really a contribution to the field to kind of have us partner up. And so what we're going to do today is really just spend our time kind of running you through that process in terms of how we approached the development of a highly successful COVID-19 health promotion campaign.
So you might wonder, what does it mean to take a community's value approach to creating a health promotion campaign? A lot of times people understand what is a health promotion campaign. You might have seen it with tobacco cessation or alcohol, peer reviewing and social norming alcohol behaviors. Rebecca and I wanted to take an approach where we bridge sort of the health and well-being issues with student leadership and understanding who we were as a community. And so we first had to think about what do we value at UAB, and we had several things that told us what it is that we valued. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about how we pulled into the fold pretty quickly the idea of our university creed, the Blazer Way. And we understood that that was a value statement that was put out back in 2018 by a group of faculty, staff, and students from across the enterprise, including our medical side, which really articulated for our community, this is who we are as a community, this is how we behave in the community. And that is one way that we looked at community values and what that meant. We also drew on some theories. Right away, Rebecca and others on our committee brought in the idea of health promotion types of theories that Rebecca's going to talk about here in a minute. These are not new in the health promoting world. and in health promoting campaigns. What was a little bit different is that we then drew a bridge, really connected those theories to theories of student leadership development, as well as what we see in sort of alternative break experiences with looking at active citizenship. And what does active citizenship look like when especially our students, our undergrad students, our graduate students, UAB is their community right now. And then we also, at our university, we have a concept called shared governance, which really is from a presidential message from Dr. Watts that we share in decision making across the enterprise, and he includes students in that equation. So Rebecca and I knew that in order to do this and do it successfully, students had to be at the center of the decision making and the discussions, as well as the implementation. So that's what it meant for us at UAB to think about a community values approach to creating a health promotion campaign.
So we're just going to run you through the process, and then we're going to kind of break it down a little bit. So I know we've got some of the people that actually were part of these committees that are kind of had joined this. So really, I hope at the end when we get a chance to do some questions that also some of you will think about, you know, what you want to share about sort of your contributions to the process or kind of how this went. But basically from the beginning, we said, okay, we got to partner health and well-being along with student experience. We need to do that in some pretty significant ways. We also wanted to make sure that we included what we think of as other areas sort of across the division. So we asked each AVP to put forth 2 folks from their area that could serve on a task force. In addition, we went out and looked for who are the faculty that might make sense to kind of help us to kind of craft this message. And then we said we've got to have students that also are from the very beginning a part of this. We put together a Teams page, and up on that Teams page immediately went all the models that we're going to review with you today. And then we decided, okay, we've got to do some sort of a survey. We've got to get some feedback from students about what is it that's going to motivate them to do these things and what's going to inhibit them in terms of doing these things. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of when we talk about the health belief model. But we surveyed students, and that process really changed from what we thought we were going to do to kind of what we ended up doing. And that was primarily because of student feedback and how students said, again, it was the middle of the summer and we needed to get student feedback quickly and efficiently. And so they really helped to help us with that design in terms of what that might look like. We also then, once we kind of got all of that data, and our marketing folks here in Student Affairs put together some designs, we set up focus groups, and a number of different folks from that task force and across the division held these focus groups to gather feedback on the concepts and those initial assets that have been developed. And then once we really kind of had it firm and we went back to the committee and the students kind of blessed it and said, yep, this looks good to us, the marketing folks developed an asset page so that we could make sure that people could own this themselves. We wanted to make sure that this campaign was not something that was sterile, that it could evolve over time, and that it was something that the students could have ownership of. So again, we worked with students to approve all the designs for all kinds of different things, and we'll show you some of those items that we've purchased, and purchased quite a bit more actually this semester because it's continuing to go on. But we worked again with students and colleagues across the campus then to sort of push that campaign out. So that just gives you sort of an overview. I'm going to step back and sort of talk a little bit about some of the theories and then kick it off to Mary so she can talk about some of the other theories. So from a health perspective, the health belief model, you're probably familiar with it. This is one of the big models that we use in terms of thinking about how people make changes. And so, you know, we've got this threat out there, right, which is COVID-19. And so you can look at this, the modifying variables, right, in terms of what are the different kinds of things that are going to go in here. So we've got the perceived seriousness, the perceived susceptibility. And again, for a 19-year-old or a 26-year-old or a med student, you know, again, thinking about who our students are, what's the perceived seriousness, what's the perceived susceptibility, what are the perceived benefits versus the perceived barriers, And then kind of how do we get them to this place of actually sort of moving into this behavior and keeping in mind this diffusion of innovation model. We usually think about this in terms of like technology, right? In terms of like who's going to get the brand new phone versus who's not. But it's relevant in terms of this as well, that there's some people that are going to sort of be early adopters. And from the very moment that Fauci said you should be wearing a mask, that's it. They're figuring out how do they get one and they're moving forward. But there were others where the university literally had to give them several masks, require that they use it. And they're sort of going to be on this other side of things, kind of that it's just for whatever reason, they're late adopters or maybe even laggards, right? In terms of those kinds of things. But really important for us was this health belief model, because we realized that, we didn't know what would be the barriers for students. We really, we could guess, but that's really all we were doing. And so it was critical for us to, again, have a theoretical model in place and then sort of move forward with some surveys. I'll kick it over to Mary so she can talk about some of the other models.
This is kind of what makes this campaign a little bit different than, say, a typical health promotion campaign, and that is the involvement of student leadership theories and understanding of community. And for those of you who are in student leadership, you understand the social change model of leadership development. At the center of this model, of course, is that idea of social change. And we knew that what we were trying to do was create some social change for our students who are used to having a quote unquote college experience. What we were going to be asking them to do was to veer from that in a much different way than college has ever been experienced before. And so we knew that at the center of student involvement with this would have to be that concept of what are we trying to do with our community. And those of you who know then the social change model of leadership development understand that through this model, you're developing different types of values, both at the individual level, the group level, but what we wanted to get to was that societal community value level, which is citizenship. We think of UAB as a community. It's a pretty large community given the whole enterprise. We are I think at about 21,000 students, but that includes a wide array of students, including med students, dental students, optometry, undergrads, grads, researchers, post or fellowships. All of these things were important to us because these are students who are part of our community. And you mix that in with about 22,000 employees, and you know that the community had to create a pretty large change in a short amount of time. We also looked at that idea of active citizen continuum. This is a concept from Breakaway, which is a vendor that really thinks about our alternative break experiences. The active citizenship or citizen continuum they created to go from member all the way to active citizen. We wanted to push students to that active citizen or at least conscientious citizen concept that UAB is their. You go from apathy to action, and beyond that, how do you not just do it for yourself but hold peers accountable as well? That this is our community, these are our values, and if I'm wearing my mask for you, you're wearing your mask for me. So again, along with all of our values that we looked at, along with these models, we were able to create something that was somewhat unique at this moment in time of a global pandemic. So really the scope of our task force, we came together, we knew we were going to be meeting for a short amount of time. Certainly this wasn't a committee that you were going to spend 18 months on. It was going to be pretty quick and pretty efficient. So we developed, our scope was to develop a marketing plan to create a culture of adherence, bystander intervention, and peer-to-peer accountability related to the UAB health guidelines, policies, and procedures for each phase of transition. And then our task force was, of course, there were faculty or staff and students from student affairs, but we also included faculty from around the campus. In particular, Robin Landsey, Kelly Morrison, these are our faculty Robin understands public health. She's in public health. Kelly's in communication. Those were critical faculty. We needed to lean on their expertise as we built this campaign. So it was a very comprehensive task force. We then broke that task force into subcommittees to really work on the individual components, not just of the visual identity of the campaign, but also of the concepts of how we want to move forward with this. So for example, even on our presentation today, Chris and Jennifer, I think, are in the room, and they worked with the students. So there was a student subcommittee, there was an assessment subcommittee, there was a marketing and communications subcommittee, and there's a fourth one that is, I'm drawing a blank on right now. Rebecca, help me. But in other words, there were subcommittees that worked on these components so that we could do things and do them quickly.
The task force. Was it me echoing?
No, you're good. You're good.
So as that task force came together, what we were really thinking about, and I've only got one example up here, but what we were thinking about is we were thinking about 4 behaviors. So staying 6 feet apart, hand washing, cleaning protocols, and wearing a mask. And so we had these 4 behaviors, and initially we conceptualized, okay, we're going to send this survey to a bunch of people via email, and we're going to kind of just see what kind of response rate we can get, and we're going to ask them about all of these different things. And the students were like, no, this needs to be short. We need to break this up. We can do this in a different way. How can we do this through social media? And so Dr. Morrison, who's in communications, was like, all right, let me think about this. Let's see if we can't, sort of do this in a different way. Mary and I had sort of drafted up a survey, and then we worked with the faculty members and also with the students to sort of break that into multiple different components. So we actually had 4 surveys that went out, and those surveys went out via social media. So you may get 2 of those surveys, but we just sent it out, right, in terms of whoever it is that's going to do that. So you can see here the standard questions were: considering the personal protective behavior of, and it would be one of those 4. This example is face mask. What is the greatest barrier that would prevent you from wearing a face mask while on the UAB campus? And so what we were looking at there again is this is a clear adaptation of the health belief model, right? So we're just wanting to know what would be a barrier for them. And then what is the most important factor that would motivate you to wear a face mask? Again, using that model. Who would you be most likely to listen to about the importance of wearing a face mask? Because again, as we're sort of starting to brainstorm, we're wanting to know, is it the medical folks? Should it be peer-led? Like who are they going to listen to? Who's going to make the biggest difference for them? And then what type of message would motivate students to wear a face mask? And again, this was, we allowed this to be not just quantitative, but qualitative. We had a couple of places where it was more quantitative, but mostly this was a qualitative survey where they could just write in kind of what they thought. And then we had to go back and sort of code that and look for themes and those kinds of things. The last one there is, what central theme do you think would motivate students to wear a face mask while on the UAB campus? And those themes were actually generated by that task force. So again, a lot of student involvement and involvement of other people, sort of just thinking through like what's motivating us, what might motivate our students. And I think we were pretty surprised at sort of what came back. I think that what we thought was going to be the biggest was sort of caring and compassion, but that is not kind of what we see. And this is just the responses for the face masks. But if you look at all 4 of the surveys, what you'll find is that responsibility is one of the top ones in all 4 of those. And that was really surprising to us. So we came back and we had this information where, okay, we know staying 6 feet apart is going to be important. We also know hand washing is going to be important. We know wearing a mask is important. And cleaning protocols are important. But there really wasn't, when we looked at the data, there wasn't as much there in terms of people being inhibited to do it, or, like there just wasn't as much there. And there was this huge piece of responsibility. And so as folks started to kind of think about, well, what should our campaign be? Dr. Morrison actually was the one that developed this sort of, well, maybe we could do this SHOW acronym. And I'll be honest, when she put that to us, I was like, No. I thought the students were going to think it was cheesy because it kind of broke down and kind of had, whatever it is. And I think our initial conceptualization was show some blazer love, or show some blazer spirit. And I'll let Mary kind of, talk more about that. But just going back to these, because I didn't kind of go over them with you can see some of the responses there in terms of, it was really important for us to sort of see what were those barriers, what was going to motivate folks. And one of the things that we learned about masks is that over and over and over again, even though I haven't listed it on the slide, people would write in that they didn't have access to masks, that they needed masks, that free masks would make a difference. And so one of the things that happened here at UAB is that from this survey alone, the university made the decision to sort of move forward with that. Before people across the country were doing that, we knew that our students had spoken that they needed masks, and our administration was already working to sort of see how they could give students free masks. Switch it to Mary now.
So in order to sort of take the data from the survey and drill in a little bit further, we wanted to do some visual identity out there and get student response. And so what we did is we had the Student Affairs Marketing and Communications team create a visual identity of SHOW as the data informed us. And SHOW stands for, and you'll see it again, but it's staying 6 feet apart, hand washing, owning responsibility, which the O took on a different meaning at first, and then students gave some feedback on that, and then wearing a mask. So we went into focus groups with both the folks who work with students on a daily basis and our marketing and communications team. And we asked 4 questions. What components of the visual identity and campaign would motivate you to comply with university guidelines for a healthy return? And again, there were 2 concepts. So one was show some blazer love, and show some blazer spirit. And overwhelmingly, well, let me go through the questions first, and then I'll come back to what the students said. What are your barriers to comply with university guidelines for a healthy return? Does the proposed campaign help you or hinder you to comply? How does the campaign help or hinder your ability to hold peers accountable to health promoting guidelines? And what suggestions do you have for the campaign, the visual identity, and the other components? And we, at the student groups that were involved in focus groups were the graduate student group, the orientation leaders, the Interfraternity Council, IFC, our mental health ambassadors, Panhellenic. We had several multicultural and diversity groups, RAs, and international students. And overwhelmingly, the students loved the colors of the campaign, sort of that first slide Rebecca showed. They did give feedback on the responsibility piece, and they said, we don't like show some blazer love. We like show your blazer spirit, which brought in more, it's about us. We have to take responsibility. And so this slide just kind of shows you a couple of the pieces of swag and pieces of the campaign we used last semester. We actually have a new batch of swag in. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The student masks that you see on my left-hand side and right-hand side, the left-hand side is our USGA president. The right-hand side is someone who works at University Recreation. And those were paid for by the Undergraduate Student Government Association. So USGA had skin in the game right off the bat by using their budget to purchase an additional mask for students beyond the one UAB was providing. We had yard signs, T-shirts. We had a lot of snafu issues with the T-shirts, so we got double the order, which was kind of worked to our benefit. We were able to push things out a little bit more. We had buttons that had the whole campaign on it, and then we also had buttons with each individual component in case we had to push an individual component more so based on the data for our safety. And then the other little piece that we had in the fall was this hand fan, which has the whole campaign on it. Those were really popular at football games, especially in the Alabama heat. When we asked the students, what kinds of swag items do you want for next semester? The overwhelming response we got was things that are practical, things we can use and understand that this is still a health promotion campaign. And so USGA put another $10,000 in to purchase different masks. They're black masks that really talk about owning your responsibility. We started to see off-campus gatherings and different things students were doing to get that college experience, and students wanted to make sure that we were really pushing the message of responsibility. We have hand sanitizers that say hand washing, and if you can't, use this hand sanitizer, basically. And then we also have hand sanitizing wipes so that when students went into the classrooms or in other public spaces, they felt like they could use wipes. So those are the things that we're using this semester. We've spent approximately $40,000 on swag. And we've gotten lots of student leaders involved in passing out swag, but also really promoting it on social media, and promoting contests, competitions, and things that they can do to get the message out about show.
I know, Mary, did you want to talk a little bit about those, or did you want us to, we can at some point, I know Chris and Jennifer are sort of on the call, so we could even ask them to at the end, but.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think Jennifer and Chris could talk even more fully if they would be open to it. To even insert right now, if you want to talk through the different types of competitions that we had going on with the individual student as well as the groups. And then the other thing is we have new contests planned for this semester, which includes more departmental competitions, like from University Dining and the Hill Student Center. So folks are getting involved quite a bit more. The other thing that is happening this semester is we were able to purchase through our VP and led by our assistant vice president and director of divisional operations, window clings for different offices around campus that are full, like, glass door front window clings, to really enhance sort of that message being pushed out in the student affairs buildings. And we're doing a selfie contest this year using those window clings. The contests last year were based around some individual contests with the different components of the show campaign, highlighting one each couple of weeks. Of course, the winners would receive swag bags. So maybe Jennifer and Chris can talk through that at the end when we wrap up.
I think that's one of the things that was really important to us, is that people be able to kind of take ownership across the division. You know, sometimes what you'll see with something like this is it's like just your wellness services or your health promotion office is the only one. They own the brand, you know, they push out whatever they can push out, and it's defined kind of by what budget they have. But what we did is from the very beginning, we said, okay, we're going to involve everybody across the division. We're going to get partners from across the division. We're going to donate money from across the division. And we're going to come up with ideas from across the division. And so that's what I loved, you know, that not only did we have all of the great activities that were happening in terms of student involvement, but we also had things at campus recreation. So at campus recreation, you could win a t-shirt by answering a quiz. And so we gave out about 200 t-shirts that way. I know Mary was also teaching a class at the time, and her students came up with a TikTok channel. I don't know if you want to kind of speak a little bit to that.
Yeah. Well, I was teaching a class about the social change model of leadership. And I thought, well, their end of the year group project is going to have to be something about show, because this is the one thing that they can study right now and understand. How do you create social change on your campus? And so in the end, what they did is they took some data, scientific data, as well as what the university was asking students to do, and they created a TikTok channel with all of these fun, this generation style videos. And so that was a cool thing. We have plans to push that out even a little bit more. So students could do whatever they wanted to with the campaign within the boundaries of the visual identity. And so we've really seen an uptick in students being really creative with how to push it out.
And again, because we allowed for that, within the visual identity, you can do whatever it is. The AVP that is the director of operations, Patty Martinez, she came up with these. These are luggage tags that she purchased for all of the students right before they were going home. Because of course, we knew this was going to be something we were going to still be kind of coping with. And it was a great idea. And it was something that she could afford to do and kind of pass out and kind of get going. So yeah, lots of opportunity to engage partners. And I think that's one of the biggest things is sort of including the students, but also engaging partners. I think we're going to switch gears a little bit and sort of move away from talking about our process here and sort of thinking a little bit more for you about how you might involve students. And so I'm going to tag Mary on that. I think on this particular one, we're just going to kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a very general way, you've heard us talk about, that it was very important at UAB and in a division of student affairs to have students at the center of decision making and the ownership of the campaign, and then pushing it out to their peers. And so we really had to think about, and this is both moving forward and looking back, reflecting back, some of the things that we had to think about in order to include students in the process. The first thing you want to think about is, who are your student leaders? Inviting them to the committee, and you have to remember this was during the summer, and so a lot of our students were not here physically, which was okay because we were all in the virtual environment. And so inviting them in from the beginning and not creating the committee and then going, oh, we should have students on this committee. We looked at that from the very first day. We want to have students on the committee. So we had to think about who were those influencers on campus. We also had to do that survey. We had over 600 responses on that survey. And really, university relations did turn to us at different points of this to understand how the students were reacting to a larger campaign that was going on at the same time. And so we were able to use that data not just to create our health promotion campaign, but to do things just like Rebecca said. Hey, students need free masks. We can't just give free masks to faculty and staff. We've got to do this for students too. So we were able to advocate in a large way for our students. Really having a committee of students to get a lot of good feedback about, what do you want to do with the campaign? What is it? We didn't want it to be a campaign that just went out once or twice and we kept reminding people from like an administrative point, but we wanted to be a flexible living campaign. And with students at the forefront of this, they were able to tell us what would make it a flexible living campaign. And so making sure that they had not just committee membership, but committee leadership and making those decisions. And then we also had to get that final feedback from the students. That was kind of the point of the focus groups. There were a lot of people on our committee that loved Show Your Blazer Love or Show Some Blazer Love. And the students rejected that. They thought it was cute. They thought that they would use it in a personal way, but they would never use it in a more broad way for a health promoting campaign. That was a lesson learned for us, for sure. And then, Rebecca, maybe I'll kick it over to you about student ownership.
I think that, it's so important to feedback. I mean, and this whole process really taught me that. Again, as I, even when I was young, but certainly as I age, I realized that, it's so important to know your student and the diversity of your student and have them all at the table. So the fact that we were able to kind of, again, have a diverse group at the on the task force itself in the summer, and then get 600 students to fill out surveys to give us feedback, and then really think broadly about who these focus groups are. I mean, I think that's what changed that. I mean, that O would have been observing cleaning protocols. If it was just coming from a health promotion standpoint, it would have been staying 6 feet apart, hand washing, owning cleaning protocols, and wearing a mask. But it was the students who said really clearly, both in the survey, and then also because it was qualitative and they could write in all kinds of different paragraphs about kind of what was going on and what they thought. But then also in the focus groups, they really talked about this issue of, look, I'm going to take responsibility for myself, but I also need the university to let everybody know that they are responsible for this community. They are responsible for doing what's right. There was a little bit of concern from some students that, look, I might do what I'm supposed to do, but unless everybody does what they're supposed to do, this is going to fall through the cracks. And so, again, that's not something I would have predicted in any way, shape, or form that the students would be conveying to us. Not just is owning responsibility important, but it's important enough that it is going to kick out observing cleaning protocols and be one of the top 4 things that we need to say to students, that, you know, that in showing your Blazer spirit, that part of doing that is owning responsibility. And I think Mary and I were about ready to just die because that fits so perfectly with the Blazer Creed. And it just
well, and that's, I was going to say, the first line of the Blazer Creed is, I hold myself accountable to this unique community. And then it goes into our values. But that accountability piece, you know, like, I hold myself accountable, I'm also going to hold you accountable. This community holds us accountable. It all fit very well with the Blazer Way, the University Creed. And actually, it was a good test of the Blazer Way because, you know, launching it in 2018, we saw a lot of good uptick in it, but we also just kind of saw people not doing much with it. But to hear our student leaders come to the table and say, no, we believe in this. This is what we want.
And when you think about it, again, we labeled this presentation in terms of community values, because it's like we started sort of knowing, hey, we want to use our community values. But this, like Mary said, this was a test of those community values, because we didn't go into this campaign thinking, you know, okay, you know, that somehow our, you know, our actual message would include something like that. That came from the students. And so that really articulated to us that one of the UAB students can, you know, that their values really is this accountability piece, and that people need to take responsibility on behalf of the community. And so that was just a really cool piece about including students in the process. And I think that, you know, sometimes you think when you've got all this education and you've worked with students for years that you know what they're thinking. And the answer is, really, you don't. You absolutely don't. And you need to get a broad group of students from the very beginning to sort of be involved in something like this if you want it to be successful. Because there's lots of other great stuff we have that is pretty, that is on our campus, but that our students from the very beginning started giving us feedback. They were like, it's too cartoony. It reminds us of these old Department of Health handouts. You know, they had all kind of stuff to tell us about that, but they do not about this. The marketing team at Student Affairs that came up with this really beautiful color scheme and this heart and, you know, whatever, from the very beginning, the students were like, nope, that resonates. And of course it had to match and sort of dovetail with the other one that was already out there. So we couldn't go with just, you know, again, if you look back at that survey data on masks, they were saying, we want professors, we want medical professionals to sort of tell us, you know, that this is what they want to do, and we want to see that visual identity, right? But we had to kind of go with the cartoony that already existed and sort of match what we could, and ultimately came up with a really great campaign, and in particular because of the involvement on the committee and their own ownership of it. And we're trying to, again, really just work with the students to make that clear that there's still a university campaign, right? The UAB United campaign is there. But this is their campaign that we helped them, but that they developed, and that they have that skin in the game. They're using their money as well for it. We'll talk a little bit about assessment. So early on in October, right, we had the National College Health Assessment going out. And so we were like, oh, wow, here's an opportunity to just get some kind of feedback to see, do our students even know what it is? And this is very early on. Again, most of our students had just been on the campus 4 or 5 weeks at this point, at the time we roll this survey out. And so it was really cool for us to see even just this little bit. I'd be really curious what it would look like if we did it now, because I think now that visual identity is so far out there, I think that we would see some different mixes in terms of that. But we were very excited to see, you can see that for those individuals that were fully online, fully in class, 100% of those knew this is not a spirit campaign. And again, all we asked them is, show your Blazer spirit. Is it a spirit campaign, B, COVID practices campaign, C, and we had these different things, and everybody either picked A or B. They either knew it was a spirit, which it is not, right? Or they knew it was related to COVID. And you wouldn't intuitively think that. And so we know that those folks that picked the COVID really kind of could recognize it. So 67% of those that were on campus and in remote classes, they were familiar with it, and 41% of the remote students were familiar with it. So again, what we knew was that we had all this swag that we'd invested in that is only for those people who are on campus. We've got 100 yard signs that are out there. We've got t-shirts that are being given out, but we don't have a way to give 2,000 t-shirts out to students that are fully remote. The ones that are fully remote could only have seen it through our social media posts. That's the only way that they would know that it was a COVID campaign. And if you look again, this is in October, this is very early into this campaign. The students who live on campus, 82% of the residents knew what it was versus only 47 to 50% of the respondents who lived off campus. And so what this told us is that we needed to really beef up our off-campus sort of involvement in this, in terms of just continuing to grow that social media platform for show, and sort of figure out how could we do that in a way that again, we could get those remote learners to be more involved in this, because most of our swag was physical things that they'd have to be here for, and we wanted to make sure that we changed that. I will kick it to you, Mary, for some future assessment.
So we know that the NCHA information gave us a little bit of just some baseline information about the spread of the campaign and how people viewed it and understood it. Our future assessment, there's quite a bit that we've looked at. One of the things that we want to do is a student leader evaluation, perhaps focus groups, to really understand the ways in which, how did they connect health promotion and their own leadership and the concept of social change? Did they see social change happening through having a health promotion campaign on the UAB community? So that's one of the ways in which we want to understand how this campaign was effective for our student leaders. And then we need to do a more broad brush survey of all of our students who were mainly live and in person, to understand how they experienced the campaign as well. And so Rebecca and I will be working with, I think Jan May is on this call, to really think about how do we survey our students now that the campaign is in full swing, and how do we understand the ways in which they interacted with it and that it made a difference for them. So we're excited about this campaign. We've been able to start conceptualizing a white paper, really thinking about the future assessment of this, and not just that, really thinking about, as a health promoting university, how do we continue to connect student leadership, not student leaders who are health promoters, but student leadership across the enterprise to this understanding of health promotion, well-being, and positive social change. So
I went ahead and put it up there so you guys can kind of see at least one of the visual identities there as we sort of move into questions. I think in order for you to kind of come on screen, you have to actually request that. And so there should be something where you are, something in the right-hand corner, I think, that allows you to sort of request that. You can also put it in the chat if you want to. Any questions that folks have for us? And while we're waiting for that, I'm going to just give a huge shout out to the partners that we have here at UAB. I know Mary and I are the two presenting this, but we're really presenting this on behalf of the entire Division of Student Affairs. The number of focus groups, the number of people involved in pushing out the social media, the contests that were going on, the distribution of all of the swag. This has been an all hands on deck promotion.
Rebecca, I'm going to let Chris in, Chris
Perfect.
Jones. I think I just did it correctly. Hey, Chris.
Hey, y'all. First, just thanks to Dr. Wallace and Dr. Kennedy for the presentation and for leading this effort on our campus. But I was listening to you earlier and saying sort of what the student piece of this was, and that's what I really wanted just to hit home on, was that, you know, it was very interesting when we first rolled this out, you know, trying to get buy-in from students. And I think involving them through this process really allowed us to really serve them better. And so like this semester, I realized when I sent an email out to the students about sort of our efforts around the show campaign, they were much more on board in terms of taking ownership over promoting the campaign themselves. And so we're actually going to meet next week to talk about how our different social media platforms can play a role in it. So, you know, definitely just want to, if you decide to roll this out for your campus, just reiterating the importance of involving students, as Dr. Wallace and Dr. Kennedy mentioned.
Well, and to piggyback on what Chris is saying, another thing that we move forward with for the spring semester is asking each director, especially those directors that work with students, to create a unit plan for show. That there's not a lot of programming we're doing right now, and that show should be a paramount concern for all the directors, especially, again, those who are advising students. And so we have not just more ownership at the student level, we have ownership at the director level and unit level. And so, you know, in this last little hurdle of COVID, we're using this health promotion campaign to really do some messaging, but not just messaging. People can do programming around this. People can think about it in terms of values and connect it to their thoughts about health promotion as we become a health promoting university. So there's endless possibilities within the toolkit and the boundaries of the visual identity. Our students, faculty, and staff can take this and really push it out there and make it their own.
It also fits so beautifully with sort of this concept of collaboration, in that, again, we're using the students, we've got the faculty, and then in terms of student affairs, you know, to take two major areas and bring them together to sort of push this out, and then to expand it even further, you know, to be every director is involved, you know, that this is really not, this is above and beyond partnership, you know, that, again, sometimes I think that when you have something like a health promotion campaign, it just lands on the health center or the wellness promotion sort of lap, and those folks don't always realize the contributions that a larger approach can make. And when Mary's talking about this health promoting campus, and you know, we talk about the Okanagan Charter and the sort of the ways in which we think about that, that's what's most important. Well-being will only be achieved when there's well-being for person, place, and planet, and for all of us. We can't have well-being in one place, and we really have to all be a part of the solution. And so, again, that's part of our identity here at UAB, is as a health promoting university and as somebody who lives and breathes through the aspirations of the Okanagan Charter. And we really articulated that in this approach. Again, sort of integrating in what is our community value also as a health promoting university, in addition to sort of the Blazer Creed and responsibility and accountability and those kinds of things. So yeah, if there's anyone else that has a question, or I don't know if Jennifer wanted to ask to be on there. She did so much with our focus groups. And I mean, we just had so many leaders that just really stepped up to the plate. This is a big part of their job in the summer and the fall.
And Rebecca, if I could go back to just one little thing you said about, in addition to the Blazer Way and all that, to me, it's and not just in addition to, but in sort of in that way that weaves things together. So it's not just like something that's on, there's all of this and then there's this. It's all integrated. Yeah, it's very integrated now that, you know, some of the ideas that Rebecca and I have just from doing this campaign about how do we continue to connect that idea of social change related to student leadership and health promotion. And that's exciting to me. That's somewhat of a new way for me to think about student leadership, having that's sort of my background. And that's not really something that's come up at other universities I've worked with. with student leadership development. You know, you have your normal health promoting student leaders, but this is where we're talking about, you know, your USGA leaders, your RAs, all these folks who we now have a common language to understand. How do we move forward when we are trying to achieve social change?
And I think you see this again across NASPA. You know, what are the student governments talking about? Well, they're talking about mental health issues. Well, that's a health promotion campaign waiting to happen, right? And so everybody is talking about student well-being. And you're not going to be able to address student well-being by leaving that just on the student health and well-being sort of area to do it. We are going to have to, across the country, come together in these kinds of collaborations where we take the best of the fields and learn from each other and really incorporate those together to make something that's truly valuable. Because again, it's not like, you know, wellness promotion couldn't have taken their peer educators and sort of pushed this out, but that would have been at any campus, you know, 10 to 30 peer educators that were pushing it out, rather than what the entire student involvement and leadership, you know, which includes those peer educators, the capacity that they have is extraordinarily different. And really, I think that the student leaders across the board are interested in student health and well-being. It's not just those folks that choose to be peer educators or health peer educators, but it's everybody. Everybody is interested in this issue, and it's the only way. And it's been highlighted for COVID, but this is going to go long beyond COVID, because student well-being has got to be at the center of what student affairs is doing.
And then the last thing I want to say is, Rebecca said this already, but I think it bears worth mentioning again. Our Vice President for Student Affairs, Dr. John Jones, he was the first on board. He was the person who said, this is what I want. And that was well before we even knew there was a university campaign that was underway. He wanted a student campaign, and his advocacy for the students is what spurred for us to move in this way. So that bears worth mentioning, that a VP put all of his resources and advocacy behind making sure this happened for students.
And has continued to do so. Yeah, I'll give a shout out to him as well, not just because he's my boss, but because this really was, it really is a shining moment for him, you know, that he conceptualized this and said, we need to do this. And the entire team then took that concept and sort of ran with it. But without him sort of saying, hey, here's what I'm looking for, this would not have gone in the ways that it did. So, yeah. Well, I know we've got maybe 1 minute left. I don't know if there's anything anybody wants to put in the chat, or any other, we can invite anybody up to the moderation panel for the last 30 seconds. Well, I think I'll just take a minute to thank you. So thank you so much for attending today. We really appreciate you being here with us to allow us to kind of highlight some of the great work that's been happening here at UAB.
Have a great conference.
I know Daniel's saying we've got a 5-minute grace period if we need it. I don't know if we do. If people have questions, I think Mary and I'll stick around, and I think we'll be able to see you come up in the moderation panel if you request to do so. Otherwise, we'll just stick around for a few minutes and see if anybody puts anything in the chat. You guys enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend. And as we say here at Student Affairs, be healthy, be safe, and be kind.